Hello and welcome to this week's Preps Preview. I'm Herald and Review sports writer Justin Conn. This is Herald and Review sports writer Scott Richey, and we're going to talk quite a bit about Week 2 and also about Week 3 of the Preps football season. I thought Week 2 was kind of a strange week because a lot of times it's when we find out a lot about teams, but I thought this week just let us know that what we thought we knew, we did know. It was a lot of just sort of predictable results. I thought, we're going to talk about the surprises we did see, which weren't many. For me, I think before the season, I thought Monticello was going to be a step down from what they had been maybe the previous couple of years with Ryan Donahue kind of carrying the load for them, but they haven't taken a step back at all. And I'll admit I was wrong on that, definitely. And this is after seeing a game where they didn't play their best game. I know that they're probably, they were happy to win that game against a really good Argenta-oriented team, but I think they probably went back and looked at the film and it probably didn't go real well because, they had, turnovers of their own, and Argenta moved the ball pretty well against them, and they struggled to move the ball at times. So I think they can go back to that tape and go, okay, these are some places we went wrong. At the same time, they're 2-0 now, and outside of Tolono Unity, I'm not sure there's anybody else in the schedule that is capable of beating them. So they're looking at, probably an 8-1, and who knows, they're good enough to hang with Unity. So who knows what even 9-0 season for Monticello is in the cards. For a team that really, not a lot of star power there. I don't think that there's going to be any one guy putting up big numbers. I mean, there's going to be weeks when Dylan Nisley puts up some nice stats, but more often than not, they're just going to win with toughness and just being a little more disciplined and a little deeper than a lot of teams they play.
Yeah, I mean, that's their identity this year. The last couple of years, it's been, give Ryan Donahue the ball, and now it's just we're going to beat teams up and, do just enough to win. I guess what I learned, from Week 2 when I was out at MacArthur and, kind of had talked some about, how, pretty good I thought their offense could be. It was their defense that surprised me, the most, I think, against, Champaign Centennial. They just got after the quarterback really well and, bottled up Centennial's run game and, for 3 plus quarters, really, until the game was well in hand and, the first team was on the sidelines watching, their backups wrap up the victory. Didn't give Centennial anything to work with. And, if their offense continues to, just slowly improve and steadily improve, their defense, could take them quite a ways this season.
I'm going to throw one more team in real quick on the other side of this is Sullivan Oak Valley. I thought they would play a little bit better to start the season. They had the loss to Tuscola, who it doesn't look like such a bad loss now since the Warriors played really well against Tolono Unity in Week 2. But then, they really had a tough time putting away Meridian, which I think is a team that, if they are, going to be a team that goes to the playoffs, you have to take care of a team like Meridian. So, tough start for Sullivan so far. They are 1-1. It's still a possibility for them, but they're going to have to get some things cleaned up to get to be to get where they really want to go. That brings us to the top 5. Mine looks quite a bit different than my preseason top 5, and I had like 3 other teams that I wanted to somehow shove in there that I just wasn't able to fit in. So, yeah, it was a little tough. Why don't you start with your top 5, Scott?
Okay, and mine did actually change a little bit. It was a very slight change, last week, a little bigger this week, and I stopped myself from making a knee-jerk reaction and taking Argenta completely out of the top 5. I still think, like you said, they did move the ball very well against Monticello, a tough, Monticello defense. Cameron Hupp had a big game, and it just would have been rash, I think, on my part to completely take them out. But I almost did, and could have worked in Monticello themselves or even Arthur Wellington out with Hammond into my 5th spot. But it's going to go to Argenta and just say that they have some things to work out as far as it comes to ball security, before they make a venture back up, closer to number 1. At 4, Nokomis just gets a bump. They still haven't really been challenged, with blowout wins against Trenton Westland and then last week against LSA, but they have pretty experienced offense, and I think they can handle a challenge when they get it. At 3, I have Cerro Gordo Bement. They actually trailed in a game this past Friday, something that it didn't happen to them very often last year, but they responded to that, didn't really panic, and ended up with a pretty big win against Westville. At 2 and 1 is the same for me. I have Casey Westfield at 2 after a monster game from Nico Stupina, and at number 1 is Monroe Forsyth with a big game from Jack Hockaday and their own quarterback. So I don't see those two spots changing too much for me.
Yeah, and I'll just get the drama out of the way right now. Mine of 1, 2, and 3 are the same as yours, and the same as I think they've been for a bit. And that's, like you said, Maroa, Casey, Sarah Gordo, Mint. I don't think I had Sarah Gordo in that 3 spot to start the year, but I'm feeling real good about them at that 3 now. And I know they have. We're going to talk a little bit more about what they have coming up here in a minute. But if they can win their next game, I think I think we could pretty much just take a top 3 and sort of tape it on our foreheads, and then go straight to 4 and 5, which in our cases, are a lot different, and for varying reasons. It's funny you talk about Argentina making the knee-jerk reaction. I voted in the Class 1A poll, and I didn't make a knee-jerk reaction there. I dropped him 1 spot. I think I had him 5th, and I dropped him to 6th for that loss, because I still started looking at the teams below them and going, Argentina's better. They're better than those teams. But in our top 5, when you're considering the whole area, it's actually probably a little tougher than in Class 1A. So I did make a knee-jerk reaction and knock Argentina out of my top 5 here. And I had probably 6 teams for those last 2 spots. I ended up going with MacArthur for number 4. I'm jumping on the bandwagon now. I really liked the way they played against last week. I know they had a tough first week win against Jerseyville, which they lost that game last year. So I thought that just mentally getting over the hump against them, and a nice win last week. Now they're going to have a tough test against Normal West, and there's no question they still have a ton of proof before we really know that they're a top of the Big 12 type team. But I think at this point we know they're probably going to be a playoff team. I think that's pretty safe to say. And you know what? If you're a playoff team in the Big 12, you should probably at least get some consideration for our top 5. So I have them at 4. I have Monticello at 5. One of the reasons is I just really feel safe that they're not going to fall out of this thing anytime soon. So I think it's even though I wasn't blown away by the way they played on Friday, I still think at this point they're deserving of that 5th spot. Though Argentina, Nokomis were definitely on my list to where I considered putting them on there. I'd like to see Nokomis get challenged, obviously, and Argentina is going to have to see how they bounce back from the fumbles and just pretty much a really tough game to get through against the Sages. Also considered Arthur Lovington, Atwood Hammond, who's played really well through 2 games, and if they are they can sneak on this list really easily here in the future. Another team, Olney, has looked real good through 2 games, and I think that they're at least a team. They're, as I talk about in our AP rankings, they're on my watch list now. So definitely, we'll be considering Olney in coming weeks for that list. Week 3, there's maybe not quite as many marquee games as there was this week, but still some pretty good matchups. I'll start with the one I'm really looking forward to, and that's, like we mentioned before, Sarah Gorba Mint is going to be taking on Arthur Lovington, Atwood Hammond. Those are 2 mouthfuls there with all the co-ops and
you didn't even get DeLand Weldon into that, who just kind of slides by. But they do supply the Woods brothers.
Yeah, I was going to say they do. This is an interesting matchup to me because I think when you look at it, it was a pretty good game last year. I know Cerro Gordo won, convincingly, but it was a pretty solid game, and it was a weird game where they ended up playing it real late at night because of lightning and things like that. I sort of look at the Broncos maybe as the team that has kind of just on purely guys who can just impose their will on a game. I mean, Steve Isbell and D. Woods are those guys. I mean, and they can change a game in a hurry, pretty much by themselves, and they do, pretty much every week. And then and not to take away from the Broncos supporting cast because they do have a good supporting cast, but they're definitely dependent on those 2 guys, for yards and scoring. With Arthur, it's almost the opposite. They're really balanced. You just don't know. I know, Fegan's had a good start to this season, but, Plank can hurt you. Schuring can hurt you with his arm and his legs. So really, that's almost that balanced attack. You don't know where it's necessarily going to come from. So, I think the key will be, can the Broncos guys impose their will, or will Arthur be able to kind of stop those guys and then use their balance to overcome that? So I think it's a really interesting matchup. It's likely for the championship in the LVC. I mean, Villa Grove is going to have their say, but definitely I think at this point it looks like these are the 2 best teams. So, that ends up being a really big Week 3 game. But I start looking through the schedule, and I don't see a whole lot more of those, Scott. But you have another one you're looking forward to?
Really the only other one that stands out is MacArthur at Normal West. And, I think you put MacArthur in your top 5, and made me feel like, well, maybe I should. But it's always hard to compare them to the rest of our area schools, and you kind of have to go, just take every team as an individual and who they're playing, who they're beating, and I think even if MacArthur, I think they have a chance, against Normal West. I mean, just at this point, nothing would surprise me, and even if they, don't win but hang with Normal West, that's going to be huge for them. But if they do win, they could be a playoff team by week 5 because they have Eisenhower and Champaign Central after that, and I don't think either of those teams can really stack up against what MacArthur has to offer. And really, those are the 2 teams that West has played, and so they have not been challenged, and MacArthur's defense will challenge them because they laid some hard hits against Centennial. One, it wasn't, Jaquay Owens was not a very big guy, but he laid a monster block on a Centennial guy and took him off of his feet. And then Devin Ingram, he threw 1 interception, and he was forced out of bounds. And as the Centennial defensive back that picked off as he was returning it, Ingram came off the bench essentially and out of nowhere, and I was standing really close to the play and hammered the kid. So they're not afraid to throw out some hits. And I'm not sure Eisenhower and Central have done that to Normal West. So it's going to be quite the game.
And if they beat Normal West, they are all of a sudden a contender in the Big 12, which doesn't happen a lot for MacArthur. So that would turn this into a really fun season for the Generals. So yeah, they got to go on the road, and it's going to be tough. And if they lose it, I don't think you jump off their bandwagon. But at the same time, if they win it, all of a sudden you're looking at what could be a really special season for the Generals. So that is an interesting game. I agree with that one. Last week on Pick'em, I know there was a lot of talk from Aaron Dow, who you don't see here today, for probably doesn't want to, after all the talk, doesn't want to come on and admit that now he's losing to me in the Pick'em, which is no big shock. But we'll see what happens. It is tough, and I think this week there's going to be a lot of chalk. I think that there won't be a lot of movement, but there's some coming weeks where we're going to see. We're going to see who kind of rises to the top, I guess, in the Pick'em contest. So still time to get on there and get on the Pick'em contest. Of course, we're also on Twitter and Facebook, and you can follow us on or go to HR Preps and read everything we do. And for nostalgia purposes, you can even buy the newspaper and look at us in print as well. So we'll be covering everything that we can, and we'll see you out at the games.